The massive ship appeared in Earth's sky like a floating city made of metal and light. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, stretching across the darkness of space for miles. The Zephyrian Galactic Empire had arrived. Ambassador Kethvar stood in the ship's command center, his crystal body glowing with soft blue light. He had done this many times before. Find a new world, meet the locals, make them join the Empire. It was always the same story. The aliens would see the Empire's power and bow down quickly. Some tried to fight at first, but they always gave up when they saw how hopeless it was. "Sir, the scans are complete," said his aide, a tall green creature with 4 arms. "The planet has about 8 billion humans. They have basic space travel, but nothing that could hurt us. Their weapons are very old-fashioned." Kethvar nodded. This would be easy. The humans would probably offer him gifts and beg for mercy. Maybe they would cry. Most species did when they first saw an Empire warship. "What about their government?" Kethvar asked. "That is strange, sir. They seem to have many different governments. Over 190 of them. They cannot agree on anything." Kethvar made a sound like glass chiming. This was his way of laughing. Even better. Divided species are easier to control. On the other side of the ship, General Vexthal was studying Earth's defenses. He was a large, dark creature with 6 eyes and skin like black stone. He had conquered 47 worlds for the Empire. This one looked like it would be the easiest yet. "Their biggest weapons could barely scratch our shields," he told his officers. "We could take their planet in 3 days if we needed to fight. But I don't think we will need to fight at all." Down on Earth, people were panicking. The alien ship had been spotted by telescopes weeks ago as it traveled toward their solar system. Every government on Earth was arguing about what to do. Some wanted to hide. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender right away. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the United Nations building in New York, looking up at the night sky. She was a language expert who had studied how to talk to aliens. Even though she never thought she would actually meet any, she was small and quiet but very smart. She had learned 23 human languages and created computer programs that could translate unknown languages quickly. "Are you ready for this?" asked Colonel Jake Morrison. He was a tall man with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He had been a soldier for 20 years, but he was not like other soldiers. Where others saw problems, he saw puzzles to solve. Where others saw enemies, he saw people who just hadn't become friends yet. "No one is ready for this," Sarah said. "We're about to meet beings from another world. Everything we thought we knew about the universe is about to change." Jake smiled. "Good. I was getting bored with the old universe anyway." Sarah shook her head but smiled too. That was typical Jake. He made jokes when everyone else was scared. It should have been annoying, but somehow it made people feel better. The plan was simple. A small shuttle would carry Jake and Sarah up to meet the aliens in space, halfway between Earth and the alien ship. It was neutral ground. No weapons, no tricks, just talking. "Remember," said the Secretary General of the United Nations, "we are representing all of humanity. Try not to start a war." "I'll do my best," Jake said. "But if they're rude about my coffee, all bets are off." The shuttle ride up to space took 4 hours. Sarah spent the time checking her translation equipment and studying what little they knew about the alien ship. Jake spent the time making coffee and humming old songs. "Aren't you nervous?" Sarah asked. "Terrified," Jake said, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "But being nervous never helped anyone. Being ready does." He handed her a cup. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen? They could destroy our entire planet. See? Now you're thinking positive. That means anything better than total destruction is a win." Sarah stared at him. Sometimes she wondered how Jake had survived 20 years in the military with his attitude. Then she remembered that everyone who worked with him said the same thing. Somehow his crazy plans always worked. The meeting place was a small space station that Earth had built years earlier. It was not much, but it was neutral. The alien shuttle arrived first. It was beautiful and smooth, like a piece of art that could fly. The Earth shuttle looked like a metal box with engines stuck on it. "Well," Jake said, looking at the alien ship, "they definitely win the style points." They docked and walked through the airlock into the station. The aliens were already waiting in the meeting room. Sarah caught her breath. She had imagined what aliens might look like, but seeing them was still amazing. Ambassador Kethvar looked like a person made of blue crystal. Light moved through his body in patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music. General Vexthal was completely different. He was huge and dark with glowing red eyes. He looked like he could break the space station in half with his bare hands. There were two others. One was the tall green creature with 4 arms. The other looked almost human except for silver skin and no hair. "Greetings," Kethvar said. His English was perfect, but it had a strange accent. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. We have come to discuss your planet's future." Sarah started to give the formal response they had practiced. Jake stepped forward first. "Hi there," he said, walking up to the aliens with 2 cups of coffee. "I'm Jake, and this is Sarah. Nice to meet you. Coffee?" He held out a cup to Kethvar. The aliens looked confused. This was not how first contact usually worked. Species were supposed to be frightened. They were supposed to bow or hide or at least act impressed by the Empire's power. Kethvar stared at the cup. "What is coffee?" "It's a drink. Hot, caffeinated, and guaranteed to make any meeting better. Fair warning, though, this is the good stuff. Colombian beans. Might be a little strong if you're not used to it." Sarah watched in amazement. Jake was treating the aliens like neighbors who had just moved in next door. "How was the trip?" Jake continued, sitting down at the meeting table like this was completely normal. "Light years of travel must give you one hell of a, well, whatever passes for your neck." General Vexthul's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. He had conquered dozens of worlds, but no one had ever asked him about his travel experience. "The journey was adequate," he said slowly. "Just adequate? Man, you guys need better in-flight entertainment. Have I got some suggestions for you?" Kethvar was still holding the coffee cup, not sure what to do with it. His crystal body flickered with colors that Sarah's equipment said meant confusion and curiosity. "You are not afraid," he said. It was not a question. Jake shrugged. "Should I be? I mean, you came all this way just to talk to us. That says something good about you, right? Plus, anyone who travels between stars probably has some pretty interesting stories." Sarah realized what Jake was doing. He was not treating this like a surrender meeting. He was treating it like a first date. He was making the aliens comfortable, getting them to relax, making them see humans as people instead of targets. "So," Jake said, taking a sip of his coffee, "what brings the Zephyrian Empire to our little corner of the galaxy? Just sightseeing, or are you here on business?" Ambassador Kethvar finally took a small sip of the coffee. His crystal body flashed bright orange for a moment, then settled into a warm golden glow. "This is pleasant," he said, sounding surprised. "We came here on business, as you say. The Zephyrian Empire has a proposal for your species." "Great," Jake said. "We love proposals. Sarah here has a whole folder of them. Don't you, Sarah?" Sarah nodded and opened her briefcase. She had spent weeks preparing for different scenarios. She pulled out a thick folder labeled First Contact Protocols and set it on the table. General Vexthul leaned forward. His red eyes focused on the humans. "You prepared for our arrival?" "Of course," Sarah said. "We've been watching your ship for weeks. We're not as primitive as you might think." Kethvar's body flickered again. Most species they met either had no idea the Empire was coming, or they knew and spent the time building weapons that would not work anyway. These humans had spent their time making coffee and preparing paperwork. "Very well," Kethvar said, settling into what looked like a formal negotiation posture. "The Zephyrian Empire controls this entire sector of the galaxy. We have 12 different species working together in peace and prosperity. We offer your world the chance to join us." "That sounds wonderful," Jake said. "Tell us more about the benefits package." The 4-armed green alien who had introduced himself as Sub-Commander Rix pulled out a glowing tablet. "The terms are standard. Earth will become a protectorate of the Empire. You will provide tribute in the form of resources and labor. In return, the Empire will protect you from outside threats and allow limited self-governance." "Tribute?" Sarah asked, making notes on her own tablet. "What kind of tribute are we talking about?" 20% of your planet's resources annually," Rick said. "Plus voluntary military service from your population." "And the self-governance?" Jake asked. "You may keep your local customs and laws as long as they do not conflict with Empire regulations," General Vexthul said. "All major decisions will be made by the Empire Council." Jake and Sarah looked at each other. Sarah raised her eyebrows slightly. Jake nodded and grinned. "That's an interesting offer," Jake said. "But we've got a counter-proposal." He slid his tablet across the table to Kethvar. The alien's crystal body went completely clear for a moment, which Sarah's translation equipment said meant extreme surprise. "We'd like to offer the Zephyrian Empire membership in the United Nations," Jake continued. Full voting rights, cultural exchange programs, and Sarah here makes a mean lasagna for the welcome dinner. The silence in the room lasted for almost a minute. General Vexthal's 6 eyes blinked in different patterns. Rix's forearms moved in what looked like nervous gestures. The silver-skinned alien, Dr. Lithara, made soft chirping sounds. I do not understand, Kethavar said finally. You are offering us membership in your organization? Sure, Jake said. Why not? You seem like decent people. A little formal, maybe, but we can work with that. The UN is always looking for new perspectives. Sarah took over. Let me explain our history, Ambassador. Humans have a long experience with empires. The Romans tried to conquer Britain but ended up adopting British customs. The Mongols conquered China, but Chinese culture absorbed them. The British Empire covered a quarter of the world, but the colonies ended up changing Britain more than Britain changed them. What Sarah is saying, Jake added, is that we don't fight empires. We digest them. General Vexithal's stone-like face showed confusion. You are saying you want to conquer us? No, Jake said, waving his hands. Conquering is so old-fashioned. We're talking about something much more effective. Cultural absorption. You came here expecting to find a primitive species that would bow down to your superior technology. Instead, you're sitting here drinking coffee and having a pleasant conversation. I am still confused, Kethavar said. Sarah smiled. Let me give you an example. Do you know what happened when McDonald's opened restaurants in India? McDonald's? Dr. Lithara asked. A food company. They tried to sell hamburgers made with beef, but most Indians don't eat beef for religious reasons. So McDonald's had to change. They started making vegetarian burgers, chicken burgers, lamb burgers. Now McDonald's in India is completely different from McDonald's anywhere else. The point is, Jake said, when cultures meet, they always change each other. The question is, do you want that change to happen through war and resistance or through friendship and cooperation? General Vexthal leaned back in his chair. You are saying that joining your empire would change us. We're not an empire, Sarah corrected. We're more like organized chaos. The United Nations has 193 member countries, and they disagree about everything. But somehow we still manage to work together when it matters, Jake laughed. Plus, our tax system is so complicated it'll make your accountants weep. We've turned bureaucracy into an art form. You think your empire regulations are complex? Wait until you see the paperwork for starting a small business in New York. Kethavar was quiet for a long moment. His body shifted through different colors, blue, green, orange, purple. Finally, he spoke. In 3,000 years of expansion, no species has ever offered us membership in their organization. Most species either surrender immediately or fight until they are destroyed. Well, Jake said, we're not most species. We're humans. We do things differently. How differently? Dr. Lithara asked. She had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now she seemed curious. Sarah and Jake exchanged looks again. Sarah nodded. Tell them about the pizza incident, she said. Jake grinned. 2 months ago, a group of scientists in Antarctica ordered pizza. The delivery took 3 days and cost $8,000 because they had to fly it from New Zealand. They could have made their own pizza with the ingredients they had at the research station, but they wanted delivery pizza, so they figured out how to make it happen. I fail to see the significance, General Vexthal said. The significance, Sarah explained, is that humans will spend enormous amounts of time, money, and effort to do something completely unnecessary, just because they think it will be fun or interesting. We once spent billions of dollars to send people to the moon not because we needed to, but because we wanted to see if we could. We sent a car into space just because it looked cool, Jake added. We built a giant collider to smash particles together just to see what would happen. We created the internet to share information, and now we mostly use it to look at pictures of cats. Kethavar's body was now shifting rapidly between colors. Your species makes decisions based on entertainment? Sometimes, Jake said. Other times we make decisions based on curiosity or stubbornness or because someone said we couldn't do something. We're not always logical, Ambassador, but we're always interesting. This is... General Vexthal paused, searching for words. This is the most unusual first contact meeting I have ever attended. Good, Sarah said. Unusual is what we do best. Ambassador Kethavar, you said the Empire has 12 species working together. How long has it been since any of those species did something that surprised you? The crystal being went completely still. The question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. I cannot remember, he said finally. That, Jake said gently, is exactly what we're talking about. Your empire sounds very efficient, very organized, very predictable. But when was the last time someone in your empire invented something just for fun? When was the last time someone did something silly that made everyone laugh? The silence stretched on. Finally, Dr. Lithara spoke in a very quiet voice. We have not had anything new in our cultural databases for over 200 years. Jake reached across the table and patted Kethvar's crystal arm. Ambassador, I think your empire needs us more than we need your empire. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Kethvar stood in Times Square in New York City, watching humans rush past him in every direction. His crystal body flickered with confusion as he tried to understand what he was seeing. Why are they all moving so fast? He asked Sarah, who was walking beside him. Rush hour, she explained. Everyone is trying to get home from work at the same time. But this is inefficient, General Vexthul said from behind them. He had to duck to avoid hitting street signs with his large head. They should organize their schedules so traffic flows smoothly. They tried that in some cities, Jake said, but people complained that it was boring. Humans like a little chaos in their lives. Dr. Lithara was taking notes on everything she saw. Her silver skin was changing colors as she recorded data. These humans appear to be engaging in completely unnecessary activities, she said, pointing at a street performer juggling while riding a unicycle. That's Bob, Sarah said. He's an accountant during the day, but he juggles for fun in the evenings. Fun, Kethvar repeated slowly. He does this for fun. Right. No one pays him. He doesn't need the exercise. He just likes making people smile. As if to prove her point, a small crowd had gathered around Bob, the juggling accountant. People were clapping and cheering as he added more balls to his routine. Someone threw money into his hat even though he had not asked for it. I do not understand, General Vexthul said. He provides entertainment, and they give him money voluntarily. Welcome to human economics, Jake said with a grin. We tip people who make us happy. We buy things we don't need because they're pretty. We spend money on experiences that exist only in our memories. The alien delegation had been on Earth for 2 weeks as part of the cultural exchange program they had agreed to. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jake had spent 2 weeks on the Empire's capital world, Nexus Prime. They were supposed to return tomorrow and compare notes. Sub-Commander Rix was struggling with a more immediate problem. A small human child, maybe 8 years old, had approached their group and was staring up at Dr. Lithara with wide eyes. Are you a space fairy? The child asked. Dr. Lithara looked down at the small human. Her bioluminescent patches were glowing soft blue, which the child seemed to find fascinating. I am Dr. Lithara, xenobiologist of the Zephyrian Empire, she said formally. But are you a space fairy? The child insisted. What is a space fairy? The child sighed like this was obvious. A fairy who comes from space. Duh. You're all sparkly and pretty and you came from the stars. That makes you a space fairy. Dr. Lithara's patches flickered through several colors rapidly. This was not covered in any of her first contact training. I am a scientist, she said. I study living things. Cool. Do you study space fairy things? I study xenobiology, which is the study of life forms from different worlds. So you do study space fairy things, the child said triumphantly. I knew it. Dr. Lithara looked helplessly at the other aliens. None of them had any experience with young humans. Could you explain the difference between fairies and xenobiologists? She asked Sarah. Well, Sarah said, trying not to laugh, fairies are magical creatures from human stories. Xenobiologists are real scientists. But to an 8-year-old, anyone who glows and comes from space is pretty much magical. But I am not magical, Dr. You. Lithara protested. The child crossed her arms. Can you glow different colors? Yes, but that is just biochemistry. Can you fly through space? In a ship, yes, but can you talk to aliens? I am talking to you right now, but see? You're totally a space fairy. The child skipped away, apparently satisfied with this conclusion. Dr. Lithara stared after her. I think I just lost an argument with a juvenile human. Happens to the best of us, Jake said. Kids have their own logic. It's usually pretty solid, just not the kind we expect. That evening, the alien delegation attended what Jake called a typical human party. It was being held in Central Park to celebrate first contact. There were no formal speeches or government officials, just people who wanted to meet aliens and share food. Cathavar found himself sitting on a blanket next to an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had brought homemade cookies. "Try the chocolate chip," she said, offering him a plate. "They're my grandson's favorite." Cathavar took a cookie and bit into it carefully. His crystal body flashed through warm colors. "This is very good," he said. "Secret ingredient," Mrs. Patterson said with a wink. "I put a little bit of love into every batch." "Love is not an ingredient," Cathavar said, confused. "Oh, honey," Mrs. Patterson laughed. "Love is the most important ingredient in anything. You can follow a recipe perfectly, but if you don't care about the people you're cooking for, it'll never taste right." Meanwhile, General Vexthul was having his own confusing experience. A group of teenagers had challenged him to a game called Ultimate Frisbee. He did not understand the rules, but he was trying to catch a spinning plastic disc that humans kept throwing at him. "Nice catch, General," one of the teenagers yelled, as Vexthul snatched the frisbee out of the air with one massive hand. "The objective of this game is unclear," he said. "That's the point," another teenager replied. "It's just fun. But what do you win? Nothing. That's what makes it awesome." General Vexthul stood there holding the frisbee, trying to process the concept of a competitive game with no prize, no purpose, and no clear victory condition. In the Empire, every activity had a specific function and measurable outcome. "You just throw it around for enjoyment?" he asked. "Exactly. Here, throw it to me." Against his better judgment, General Vexthul threw the frisbee. His strength sent it flying much farther than intended. The teenagers cheered and ran after it. "Nice arm, General," they shouted back at him. Dr. Lithera was having a different kind of learning experience. She had been cornered by a group of college students who were asking her about life on other worlds. "So what's dating like in space?" one student asked. "Dating? You know, romantic relationships. Finding a partner. Love and stuff." Dr. Lithera's patches went through a complex pattern of colors. In the Empire, mating pairs were chosen based on genetic compatibility and career efficiency. "We use scientific matching protocols," she explained. "That sounds boring," another student said. "What about falling in love? What about meeting someone unexpected and just feeling that spark?" "Spark? You know, that feeling when you meet someone and everything just clicks. When you can talk for hours and never get bored. When you want to be better than you are because of them." Dr. Lithera was quiet for a long moment. "We do not have that in the Empire." "Dude, that's so sad," the first student said. "Love is like the best part of being alive." Later that night, as the aliens prepared to return to their ship, Cathavar found himself thinking about the conversation with Mrs. Patterson. He had eaten 7 of her cookies, and each one had tasted better than the last. "Jake," he said as they walked through the park, "what did that woman mean about putting love into food?" Jake looked at him seriously. "She meant that she was thinking about the people who would eat those cookies while she was making them. She was imagining how happy they would be, how much they would enjoy them. That caring, that hope for other people's happiness, that's love. And somehow when you cook with that feeling, the food really does taste better. But that is not logical." "No," Jake agreed. "It's not logical at all. But it's true anyway." Cathavar walked in silence for a few minutes. "In the Empire, we have food production facilities that create perfectly balanced nutrition in the most efficient way possible." "I bet it works great," Jake said. "Yes, but I do not think anyone puts love into it." "That might be something worth changing," Sarah suggested gently. As they reached the shuttle that would take the aliens back to their ship, a small child ran up to them. It was the same 8-year-old who had argued with Dr. Lithera earlier. "Space Fairy," she called out. "I made you something." She handed Dr. Lithera a drawing made with crayons on construction paper. It showed a stick figure with glowing spots standing next to a human stick figure. Both figures were smiling under a rainbow. "It's you and me being friends," the child explained. "I put it on the refrigerator so everyone can see." Dr. Lethera stared at the drawing. Her bioluminescent patches began to glow in patterns none of the other aliens had seen before. "What does this accomplish?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," the child said happily. "But it's pretty, and it makes me happy to think about you. Mommy says that's enough reason to make anything." Dr. Lethera carefully rolled up the drawing. "May I keep this?" "Of course, it's a present." As the alien shuttle lifted off into the night sky, Dr. Lethera sat looking at the child's drawing. For the first time in her life, she owned something that had no practical purpose, no scientific value, and no logical function. And for reasons she could not explain, it was the most precious thing she had ever possessed. Sarah and Jake stood in the center of Nexus Prime, the capital city of the Zephyrian Empire. Everything around them was perfect. The buildings were exactly the right height. The streets were precisely clean. The air was filtered to optimal purity. Even the weather was controlled to maintain ideal temperature and humidity. It was the most beautiful, efficient, and boring place either of them had ever seen. "It's like living inside a computer," Jake whispered to Sarah as they walked down a street where every building looked identical. Their guide was a young Zephyrian named tech specialist Morden. He was proud to show them the Empire's greatest achievements. "This district houses exactly 50,000 citizens," he explained. "Each apartment is 847 square feet, with optimal space utilization. Crime is 0.003% and citizen satisfaction ratings are 94.7%. "What about the other 5.3%? Sarah asked. Morden looked confused. "What do you mean?" "The people who aren't satisfied." "What do they want?" "Want? I do not understand. They have everything they need. Food, shelter, employment, entertainment allotments. What else could they want?" Jake looked around at the perfect streets filled with perfectly dressed people walking at perfectly measured speeds. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Maybe a reason to run." They visited the Empire's greatest museums, where every artifact was preserved in perfect condition behind force fields. They saw the libraries where all knowledge was stored in vast computer databases that could answer any question instantly. They toured the entertainment centers, where citizens could experience any story or simulation that had been approved by the Culture Council. "Everything is so organized," Sarah said that evening as they sat in their assigned guest quarters. The room was beautiful and comfortable, but it looked exactly like every other guest room they had seen. "That's the problem," Jake said, staring out the window at the city below. Every building was lit with exactly the same soft glow. No neon signs, no flashing lights. No chaos at all. It's too organized. The next day, they met with the Empire Council, the 12 beings who governed the Empire. Each one represented a different member species, and each one was perfectly formal and polite. "We hope you have found your stay educational," said the council leader, a tall being made of what looked like living metal. "The Empire has achieved perfect social harmony through careful planning and logical governance." "It's very impressive," Sarah said diplomatically. "But can I ask a question?" "Of course. When was the last time someone in the Empire created something new? Something that wasn't planned or approved or designed by committee?" The council members looked at each other. "We do not understand the question," the council leader said finally. Jake leaned forward. "She means, when was the last time someone just made something? Painted a picture because they felt like it? Or wrote a song because they were happy, or invented something just to see if it would work?" "All creative endeavors are managed by the Culture Council," another member explained. "We ensure that all artistic production meets quality standards and serves the common good." "But what about art that doesn't serve the common good?" Sarah asked. "What about art that's just weird or silly or personal? Why would anyone create such things?" the council leader asked. Jake and Sarah exchanged looks. They were starting to understand the problem. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the alien delegation was experiencing something that would change their understanding of the universe forever. It started when Kethvar woke up to the sound of music coming from the street below his hotel. He looked out the window and saw people dancing on the sidewalk. There was no special event, no organized celebration. Someone had simply started playing music and other people had joined in. "Why are they doing this?" he asked Sub-Commander Rix. Rix checked his tablet. "There is no cultural festival scheduled for today. No holidays. No government programs. Then why?" They went down to investigate. The music was coming from a young man with a guitar who was singing songs on the street corner. People were putting money in his guitar case not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Others were dancing or just standing and listening. "Excuse me," Cathvar said to a woman who was swaying to the music. "Why are you doing this?" The woman smiled at him. "Because it makes me happy. The music is beautiful, and life is too short not to dance when you hear beautiful music." Cathvar watched her dance for a while. Her movements weren't perfect. She wasn't following any organized pattern. She was just moving the way the music made her feel like moving. And somehow it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. General Vexthul was having his own revelation. He had spent the morning at a place called a farmer's market, where people sold food they had grown themselves. It was completely inefficient. The vegetables weren't uniform. The prices weren't standardized. Some vendors ran out of products early, but the people were laughing. They were talking to each other. They were tasting free samples and sharing recipes and telling stories about how their tomatoes were different from everyone else's tomatoes. "This is chaos," Vexthul said to himself, and then quietly, "This is wonderful." Dr. Lithara made her own discovery at a place called a library, not the digital archive she was used to, but an old building filled with actual books. She found a section labeled Poetry and pulled out a random book. The poems inside made no logical sense. They talked about feelings as if they were colors. They described love as if it were weather. They used words in ways that broke all the rules of efficient communication. And somehow, reading them made her feel things she had never felt before. She found a human librarian, an elderly man with kind eyes. "Why do humans write these?" she asked, holding up the poetry book. "Because sometimes the truth is too big for regular words," the man said. "Sometimes you need poetry to say what your heart knows but your mind can't explain." When the formal negotiations resumed, both sides had changed. Cathvar sat at the conference table wearing a baseball cap that said I.N.Y., a gift from Mrs. Patterson, General. Vexthul had somehow acquired a collection of street performer business cards. Dr. Lithara carried the child's drawing, and 3 poetry books. Sarah and Jake returned from Nexus Prime looking thoughtful and a little sad. "So," Jake said, settling into his chair, "we've seen each other's worlds. What do you think?" Cathvar spoke first. "Your planet is confusing. Nothing works the way it should. People do things for no logical reason. They waste resources on pointless activities." Jake nodded. "That sounds about right." "And it is wonderful," Cathvar continued. "I have never seen anything like it. Your people create beauty for no reason except that beauty should exist. They help strangers without being asked. They dance in the streets because music makes them happy." General Vexthul cleared his throat. "Your society should not work. It is inefficient and disorganized. But your people seem joyful. When did our people last feel joy?" Dr. Lithara held up one of her poetry books. "I have been reading human literature. Much of it makes no practical sense. But it speaks to something inside me that I did not know existed, something our perfect systems never address." Sarah leaned forward. "Ambassador, we saw your capital city. It's amazing. You've solved poverty, crime, disease. You've created a society where everyone has what they need. But," Jake added gently, "you've also created a society where no one has what they want. Because wanting things that aren't logical or necessary, that's what makes life interesting." Cathvar was quiet for a long moment. His crystal body shifted slowly through deep blue colors. "Our empire is dying," he said finally. "Not from war or disaster. From perfection. We have made everything so efficient, so logical, so perfect, that we have forgotten why we wanted those things in the first place. We wanted them so we could be happy," General Vexthul said. "But somewhere along the way we forgot what happiness looks like." Sarah pulled out her tablet and activated a holographic display. It showed statistics about the empire that they had gathered during their visit. "Your birth rates have been declining for 200 years, she said. "Mental health issues are at record highs. Art production has almost stopped. Innovation has slowed to nearly zero. People are leaving the core worlds to settle on frontier planets where life is harder but less controlled," Jake added. "Your perfect system is making people so miserable they'd rather risk their lives than stay." Dr. Lithara looked at her poetry books. "We have given our people everything except a reason to live. So what do we do?" Cathvar asked. Jake grinned. That was the Jake that Sarah knew, the man who saw every Impossible problem is an interesting puzzle. We inoculate your empire with humanity. He said, I do not understand. We introduce a little chaos into your perfect system. We teach your people how to be beautifully, wonderfully, productively inefficient. Sarah picked up the explanation. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But in small doses. Art programs that don't have to serve any purpose. Music that exists just because it sounds good. Jobs that people do because they love them, even if they're not the most logical choice. Street festivals, Jake added. Farmers markets. Poetry readings. Little pockets of beautiful disorder that give people permission to be human, or whatever the alien equivalent is. General Vexthal leaned back in his chair. You are suggesting we deliberately make our society less efficient. We're suggesting you make it more alive, Sarah said. Kethvar stood up suddenly. His crystal body was 6 months later. Ambassador Kethvar stood in front of the Galactic Empire Council wearing a Hawaiian shirt covered in bright flowers and a baseball cap that read Chaos Coordinator. He was about to give the most important presentation in the Empire's 3,000-year history. Honored council members, he began, his crystal body glowing with excitement. I present the 6-month progress report on the Human Integration Project. The council leader leaned forward. Like all Empire officials, he was perfectly formal and serious. Proceed, Ambassador. Kethvar activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images and data. We began with a simple test. We introduced human-style inefficiency programs on 3 planets in the outer territories. The first image showed the planet Kepler-7, where they had established something called Freestyle Friday. 1 day each week, citizens were encouraged to do whatever they wanted instead of following their assigned schedules. Initial results appeared concerning, Kethvar admitted. Productivity dropped by 12%. Citizens began engaging in non-essential activities. Some individuals started creating what humans call art without official approval. This sounds like a failure, said Councilmember Zextra, her metallic voice ringing with disapproval. That is what I thought as well, Kethvar said, until we measured other factors. The next series of images showed statistics that made the council members lean forward in surprise. Crime rates dropped by 40%. Citizens began reporting higher satisfaction ratings than we had seen in 200 years. Most significantly, the planet reported its first population increase in 50 years. People were having children again. General Vexthal, who had been invited to help present the findings, stepped forward. He was wearing a t-shirt that said, I fought the law and the law won, but then we became friends. The changes go beyond simple statistics, he said. Citizens began forming what humans call communities. Instead of simply coexisting efficiently, people started connecting with each other. They formed groups based on shared interest rather than work assignments. They began helping each other voluntarily. Dr. Lithara, now wearing a necklace made of colorful earth beads, added her observations. We documented over 3,000 new forms of creative expression in just 6 months. Music, visual art, poetry, dance, and several forms that we do not yet have words for. Citizens were creating things simply because creation made them happy. The council member for scientific affairs, a floating jellyfish-like being named Kuleth, rippled with concern. But what about efficiency? What about order? What about the systems that have kept our empire stable for millennia? Kethvar smiled, an expression he had learned from humans. The most interesting discovery was that a little chaos actually improved our systems. When we allowed citizens to suggest improvements to their work routines, productivity increased beyond previous levels. When we permitted flexible scheduling, citizens became more creative and innovative. When we introduced human-style break time, overall job satisfaction rose while stress-related health issues dropped dramatically. He showed them video recordings from the test planets. Citizens who had been mechanically efficient for decades were now laughing while they worked. Groups of workers had formed voluntary teams that competed with each other in friendly ways to see who could solve problems most creatively. But the most significant change, Kethvar continued, was in something humans call hope. Explain, the council leader said. Dr. Lithara stepped forward, holding a tablet filled with psychological assessments. For the first time in Empire history, citizens began expressing interest in the future. Not just the next work cycle or the next resource allocation period, but the distant future. They began making long-term plans. They started projects they knew they could not finish in their lifetimes, trusting that others would continue their work. They began to dream, General Vexthul added quietly. The council sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Council Member Yithpak, an ancient being whose species had been part of the Empire longer than anyone else, spoke up. "Show us the problems," she said. "Every change brings complications." "What went wrong?" Kethaver nodded. "We did encounter challenges. Some citizens became so excited about creative activities that they initially neglected their regular duties. We had to establish what humans call guidelines rather than strict rules. We learned that humans often work best when they understand why something is important, rather than simply being told what to do. There were also conflicts, General Vexthul admitted. When people are free to express different opinions, they sometimes disagree strongly with each other. We had to learn human techniques for constructive argument and agreeing to disagree. And some of the art is strange, Dr. Lethera added. Citizens have created works that serve no obvious purpose and follow no logical pattern. But humans taught us that art does not always need to make sense to be valuable. The council leader was quiet for a long moment. "What do you recommend as our next step?" "Full implementation," Kethavar said without hesitation. "But gradually. Humans taught us that change works best when it happens naturally, not when it is forced." Over the next several months, the Human Integration Project expanded across the Empire. Each planet introduced human-style changes at its own pace, adapted to local cultures and species. On the mining world of Torax 3, workers started a tradition called Tool Decoration Day, where they painted their equipment in bright colors and patterns. Productivity increased 20% because workers took better care of tools they had personalized. On the agricultural planet of Verdania, farmers began hosting harvest festivals, where they shared food and stories. The social connections led to better cooperation and the development of new farming techniques that increased crop yields while reducing environmental damage. On the research station of Kogitar, scientists started something called Failure Friday, where they shared experiments that had not worked and discussed what they had learned from mistakes. The open sharing of failures led to breakthrough discoveries that had been blocked for years by fear of appearing incompetent. But the biggest change happened on Nexus Prime itself. The perfectly organized capital city began to transform. Citizens started small gardens in unused spaces. Artists painted murals on the sides of buildings. Musicians performed in parks. Food vendors began selling homemade meals alongside the standard nutrition dispensers. The city government panicked at first, worried that order was breaking down, but citizen satisfaction ratings climbed to unprecedented levels. People were smiling on the streets. Couples were taking evening walks just to enjoy each other's company. Children were playing games that had no rules except have fun. 1 year after first contact, the Empire hosted its first annual Chaos Day, a galaxy-wide celebration of creativity, inefficiency, and beautiful disorder. Ambassador Kethavar, now known throughout the Empire as the Minister of Productive Confusion, stood on a stage in Times Square on Earth, addressing beings from dozens of worlds who had gathered to celebrate. 1 year ago, he said, his crystal body pulsing with rainbow colors, the Zephyrian Empire came to Earth expecting to find subjects. Instead, we found teachers. The crowd, a mixture of humans and aliens wearing everything from Hawaiian shirts to flower crowns to "I love chaos" buttons, cheered loudly. Humans taught us that perfection is not the goal, Kethavar continued. Happiness is the goal. Perfection is just a tool that sometimes helps us get there, and sometimes gets in the way. General Vexthul, now serving as the Empire's first Director of Constructive Inefficiency, stepped up to the microphone. He was wearing a tie-dyed shirt and had learned to juggle. They taught us that the best way to solve problems is not to eliminate them, but to dance with them, he said, actually demonstrating a small dance move that made the crowd laugh and cheer. Dr. Lethera, now the head of the newly created Department of Beautiful Mysteries, took the microphone last. She was carrying a small child, the same 8-year-old who had called her a space fairy a year earlier. Most importantly, she said, humans taught us to laugh. As if on cue, the child grabbed the microphone. Tell them about the rubber chickens, she demanded. Dr. Lethera's bioluminescent patches flashed in embarrassment and amusement. Humans, she announced to the gathered crowd. have invented a toy that serves no purpose except to make people laugh. It is a fake chicken made of rubber. It squeaks when you squeeze it. It accomplishes nothing. It is completely ridiculous. She held up a bright yellow rubber chicken and squeezed it. The silly squeaking sound echoed across the square. "And it is wonderful," she said, squeezing it again as aliens throughout the crowd began to chuckle, giggle, and make their species equivalent of laughter. Jake Morrison, now holding the official title of Chief Chaos Officer for the United Earth Empire Alliance, watched from the side of the stage. Sarah Chen, serving as Director of Cultural Translation, stood beside him. "Think it'll work long-term?" Sarah asked. Jake squeezed his own rubber chicken and grinned as the ridiculous sound made a nearby Zephyrian diplomat burst into crystalline chimes of laughter. "Sarah," he said, "we've got 12 different species.